It is an absolute honor and a pleasure to welcome to the stage, ladies and gentlemen, Neal freaking Adams. Let him hear it. So Neal, welcome to London, Ontario.
Okay, hold on a second.
Oh, jeez.
So I come to the airport and it says, "Welcome to London." I've been there.
Yeah.
What's that? And they don't say London, Ontario, they say "Welcome to London."
Right.
I think that's great. I think that's great.
We like to try and trick people when they get here. With weather like this, it's kind of like the other London too.
It's trying to get over the mountains from California.
Right.
If it makes it here, it's going to be a great afternoon.
Perfect. So where I would like to start is, I named a number of characters that you've worked on over the years, pretty much all of them. But
They're all at my table.
Exactly.
Waiting for you.
Plug, plug, plug. But there's one character in particular that you're bringing back this fall, and I think we should start with that one, and that's Deadman. There's a new run of Deadman coming out. Any Deadman fans in the audience? Yeah?
2.5.
2.5. So how did what kind of brought bringing Deadman back? Why did you bring it back? Yeah.
Okay. So the thing is that you people don't. There's some old balls guys here who understand the transition between the newsstand comic books and the direct sales market and the comic book stores. Yes? No? You remember the transition? We no longer have comic books on the newsstand. When that happened, there was such chaos in comic books, because comic book publishers would send out 500,000 comic books, and 90% of them would be returned. 90%. So they didn't know what was going on. So these entrepreneurs, those same people that have your comic book stores now, they went out and they bought the comic books from the back of the warehouses of the distributor. And the distributors claimed those comic books as being destroyed. So the publishers had no idea that this new business, this comic book store business, was beginning. In amongst all that, we had comic books that sold incredibly well, not to the newsstand, but to those geek guys who would buy them out of the back of the warehouse. Those guys became your comic book stores. Unfortunately, what that meant was, it seemed as though those comic books weren't selling well. So the Swamp Thing didn't sell well. Conan didn't sell well. Green Lantern, Green Arrow didn't sell well. Batman didn't sell well. And Deadman didn't sell well. Did they really sell well? Yes, they did. To those geek fans who would buy them from the back of the store for 7 cents and sell them for 50 cents to $2. And that is the beginning of the direct sales marketplace. And all those guys that have all those long white boxes that you buy your comic books from, those are the people who are buying those comic books from those distributors. Amongst all that was Deadman, that everybody read, but somehow they canceled the title. When they canceled the title, they stopped the story. And when they stopped the story and then picked it up later, instead of doing Deadman, they did The Adventures of Deadman. The Adventures of Deadman were some guy in spandex who's a ghost and would help ladies take their kittens out of trees and stop robberies in banks, and act like a superhero. That's not what Deadman is about. Deadman is dead. Like Casper the Dead Baby. He's dead. That's his story. It's not about his adventures in the regular world. It's about him. And that story was only begun and never continued. And I knew the story, but I never told anybody. For example, those people who might have read Deadman, do you know he has another older brother and sister who have disappeared? Do you know he has parents that are still alive and have a small circus of their own? And there's a big problem between them and the Boston brand Deadman. You didn't know that. Nobody knows that. Do you know that to save his wife's life, Deadman's father made a deal with Ra's al Ghul to save her life? And Ra's al Ghul doesn't make deals unless he gets something for it. Do you know that Deadman was not killed as a test for an assassin, but was murdered? You don't know any of these stories because you never heard the rest of the Deadman story. That's what I'm doing now. After 35 years, Deadman is coming back to tell the rest of the story. And if you read those comic books, read every word, because it's going to be the highest adventure you've ever been on.
If that alone wasn't worth the price of admission for today, I don't know what was. We got comic book history, we got the industry history, way more Deadman information than I ever knew, and a nice preview for what I will definitely be buying in October.
Well, let me just say this. Just so you know people that do the DC and Marvel are doing gimmick covers, they're doing these lenticular lens covers. I believe in gimmick covers, except I think the covers ought to relate to the story inside. So our first cover is going to be a glow-in-the-dark cover. And why is it glow-in-the-dark? Because of nuclear radiation. So that's what's on the first cover. The second cover, let me describe the second cover to give you a preview of what's coming, okay? The second cover is going to have Deadman alone on the cover in the rain with lightning, and he's spinning around as if he sees something over his left shoulder and there's nothing there. So you as a reader will pick up that comic book and under my instruction, we'll flip the comic book back and hold the cover up to the light, and you will see a giant lion about to leap onto it. How do we do that? How do we do that particular trick? We print the lion on the back of the cover, and when you hold it up to the light, you see it as well as you see Deadman. All the covers that are coming out in all these 6 issues will have a different gimmick that relates to that issue. So everyone is not just a lenticular lens, everyone is a gimmick. Whether it costs a lot of money or doesn't cost a lot of money, it's going to be there. So you're going to see one thing after another. You're going to see Ra's al Ghul hidden in a mountain where you can't see him. So you have to figure out where he is. Every cover is going to be like that.
So we're going to get Easter eggs on every single cover from yours. Are you going to be telling people what they are? Or are you going to leave it as like a treasure hunt thing that we all have to find?
A little taste there. I don't mind telling people, because you know what, if you tell a room full of people, how does the rest of the country know? They don't know. So you know, but the guy next door doesn't know. And you can like hold it over him if you want to. Hey, you know what's going to happen in this cover? Wait till you open that cover and hold it up to the light.
That's fantastic. Now, one other quick thing that did come up when you were telling that story, which I was going to ask, but you answered it for me. The correct pronunciation, everybody, is Ra's al Ghul. None of this racial Ghul business,
Right? Wants to know is Ra's al Ghul. R-A-S in English is Ra's.
There we go.
If it was spelled R-A-S-C-H, maybe. I talked to an Arab kid in a convention about a year ago. And he's 16 years old, and I said, look, I just got to ask you, because I know what the answer is, but I need you to tell me. What's his name? He goes, Ra's al Ghul. Is that the way to spell it? Yeah. Well, you spell it another way? No. Well, then it's Ra's al Ghul. Is it in Arabic? No. Then it's Ra's al Ghul. Thank you. It's this thing about people who are affected. You know, like if you buy a crescent roll, somebody steps up next to you and says, I'll take a croissant. And you go, oh, that's a crescent roll. In France, it's croissant. Maybe here.
Yeah. Now, I do want to touch on just kind of looking back as well. I mean, you talked about the start of the direct market business. But I would like to kind of take back, because you were there at the start of the conventions as well.
Yes.
Obviously, there's been a gigantic change. I mean, there's been a big change just at the London show in the last couple of years, but across the world, the convention scene has gone from really small in basements, not existing, to, when you said there was in New York,
Okay, just so you
275,000?
know, you're at what we would consider 20 years ago a big convention. And you know this is not a big convention. You know San Diego and New York are big conventions. But 20 years ago, this would be a big convention. 30 years ago, a big convention would be at the El Cortez Motel, and there'd be 4 tables, and each one would have a different artist around it. The other 10 people around the table would be the limit for the number of people at the convention. That would be 40 people, maybe 50. Comic book conventions nowadays, there's approximately 100 comic book conventions on the North American continent a year that have over 20,000 people. There's only 52 weeks in a year. Some weekends, there's 4 conventions in 4 different cities on a single weekend. I name them for you, but I don't remember that kind of stuff. So, and that is not to count the small conventions, the conventions between, say, 2,000 and 3,000 people, or 1,000 and 5,000 people. There's 500 of those. 500 in the North American continent. That's not to count Australia, Europe, Africa, even Red China. We used to call it Red China, we call it China now. They have 2, and they're going to have more. So it's taking over the world. If comic book companies could depend on all of these people to buy their comic books, they'd be rich. Now they're just sort of mom and pop business. But if you sell 80,000 copies of the comic book, that's considered to be pretty good. 80,000 copies of the comic book is just 4 conventions. And there's 100. People are not buying the comic book to support it. That's partially because there are certain towns, for example, that don't have a comic book store. This is the beginning of a business that has not really seen its apex. I know I said apex. It hasn't seen the limit that it can go to. And it's going to. And let me just tell you, I spoke to Jim Lee the other day, and he said, well, you know, the direct sales market on the internet, that's 10% of the marketplace. And what was interesting about that was last year and a half ago, he said it was 6%. So it's up 4%. So you're seeing comic books everywhere. And everybody is realizing, think about this, you're going to be able to go into Walmart, Kmart, Target stores and buy comic book graphic novels. In fact, some places you can do it now. So you're going to be able to get comic books everywhere. This is just the beginning. You are part of the renaissance of comic books. Well, there's 5 other words, I guess, but renaissance is just about the best. So you are at the beginning. This is the beginning of what's going on in comic books. This is incredible what's happening. And all your movies, all your television shows, the really successful ones, and all your games are all based on comic books. Not all. I mean, you go to a store, you go to a movie theater, and you see a movie, and you sit there and go, well, thank God this is not based on a comic book. And then the end credit will say, based on the graphic novel by so and so and so and so. No, it's incredible. We even consider Stephen King a comic book writer. It's all inclusive. This is a growing business.
I find it interesting that you said that we're through a renaissance, because I would say, and I think a lot of people would say, that you were part of a previous renaissance back when you first kind of came out and started doing the Batman books and the Green Lantern and Green Arrow.
Remember when though you guys don't remember when comic books were on the newsstand. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that very briefly if I can. It used to be that comic books were sold on the newsstand, every newsstand in the country, and they sold 1 million copies of the comic book. And I remember buying those comic books, and my friends and I would each buy a comic book, we'd stick it in our back pocket, and over the next week, we would trade each other for that comic book. So we each only bought 1 comic book that week, and then we traded. Then we got to read all the comic books. And then some smart guy would trade 2 for 1 and he'd throw the system off. This made us crazy. Anyway, so that was the way it happened. It was into trading comic books. That system doesn't exist anymore. What happened was that the new comic book fans, the renaissance of comic book fans, it's not so much represented by artists and writers, it's represented by fans. Because the fans started to recognize the new art and the new stuff that was going on, like Bernie Wrightson's Swamp Thing, and Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and all these other things that were happening. Conan by Barry Smith. And so they went in with their father's station wagon to a local distributor, and they went into the back and they started buying comic books. Now the way this happened is this. A long time ago, when I was a kid, they would, the comic book companies didn't want to get what's called returns. They didn't want to get their comic books returned that didn't sell. So they said, well, why don't we do this? We'll cut the title off the comic book, and we'll wrap all those titles in rubber bands, and we'll return all those titles to you, the publisher, and we won't have to return full copies. So the publisher said, okay. Now, when I was a kid, I would go to my local toy store, didn't have Toys R Us at that time. I went to the local toy store, and I would buy comic books with the title cut off. Because the local distributors were not destroying those comic books and returning the titles to the publisher. They were selling them to the toy store. So I could buy comic books for 3 and 4 cents. Because distributors are, let me see what the phrase is, dishonest thieves, and publishers are stupid. As a basic principle, if you just take the principle that publishers are stupid and distributors are thieves, you get to understand this. And I'm being very serious. If you think I'm kidding, thieves and stupid. Because if you were a publisher, wouldn't you recognize when you went to a toy store that there's your comic books with the title cut off, and then call your distributor and say, hey, you're selling those comic books after you cut the titles off. And we would buy them, and we would make sure that the slice didn't cut through 2 or 3 pages and screw the story. Just the title. Now, the distributors after a while said, hey, Mr. Publisher, they didn't say Mr. Stupid Publisher, they said, Mr. Publisher, we have an even better idea. Why don't you do this? Since you don't want to get these little rubber band wrapped titles, why don't we just sign an affidavit that we destroyed those comic books and send it to you? Stupid. And so they did. And they called it the affidavit return system. So if they didn't sell this many comic books, but maybe they sold them out the back door, they would make an affidavit that said, we destroyed these comic books. So all across America, young teenagers and 20-year-olds would take their father's station wagons and they would go down to the local distributor and they would buy them off a table that was sitting there that had Penthouse, Playboy, and comic books. And they would buy them for 7 cents. They would take them to the local motel or their father's garage and sell them to all the neighborhood kids for 50 cents to $2. They would not pick Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane or Pat Boone comics. They would pick Swamp Thing and Deadman and Green Lantern, Green Arrow and Batman. They would pick those and sell them for extra money. That's how they made money. The publishers were too stupid to know this was going on. It was going on all across the country. There were 400 and continued to be 410 local distributors across America. Every one of them was selling comic books to local kids, who were then in turn selling them for 50 cents and $2. And those kids became the first 1,500 comic book stores that opened in the first 5 years, 3 or 4 years of the direct sales market. Because they went and approached the publisher and they said, you know, I know that you're not selling many comic books. Why don't we buy them direct from you and we'll buy them at a lower price, but we'll promise we won't return any. And the publisher said, you won't return any? That's insane. All distributors return comic books. No, we won't return any. We won't return one comic book because we know our market. And so the publisher said, sure. Within a year, they were selling over 5,000 copies of comic books. And within 5 years, they had comic book stores all across America. That's how this began. That's why we don't have comic books on the newsstand. And that's why publishers are stupid.
Have they smartened up at all in those 30 years?
Have they what?
Smartened up?
Not really, because you know they're starting to send out comic books and suggesting returns, aren't they? What's wrong with them? As soon as you start returns, you're going to get screwed. That's what's going to happen. They're not smart enough to look at it. If we don't learn by history, we're doomed to repeat it. Isn't that what you learn in the history classes? Well, they're doomed to repeat it this time. No, they haven't learned.
Speaking of like the publishers and everything, I know that you've, through your course of your career, you kind of relaunched a lot of characters and kind of come in and try and breathe new life into it.
Successfully.
Successfully, yes. Some people have tried to not so successfully. What are some of the things that you would do when you came up against an editor or a publisher when you had a creative vision for breathing new life into someone or bringing a character back, and they said, I don't really like that. Was there a way that you would convince them to do it, or do you just do it anyway and just tell them?
I would lock the door and tell them that I wouldn't open it until they would agree with me. Who could resist a smile? Really? No, nobody. Why would you argue with me? Aren't I a nice guy? Pretty much. Am I going to say something bad? No. They were pretty. Remember, their sales were so bad that I would come in and just as they were going to cancel Detective Comics, Batman's Detective Comics, I would volunteer to do Batman. Or I went to Stan Lee and I volunteered to do any comic he had in the stable, and he said, well, you can have any comic book you want. I said, well, what's your worst selling title, Stan? And Stan said, well, the X-Men is our worst selling title. We're going to cancel it in 2 issues. So I said, well, I'd rather do X-Men. And Stan said, I don't think you understand, Neal. We're going to cancel it in 2 issues. So I said, well, you're not going to pay attention to what I do then, right? Stan said, well, that's true. I said, then I'd like to do the X-Men. He said, well, I'll make a deal with you. You do the X-Men, and then we cancel it, and then you do a big selling title like the Avengers. Now that doesn't sound funny right now. But about 15 years ago, that was funny as hell. Because the Avengers weren't selling at all. I'm just saying. So I did 10 issues, and then they canceled the book. And I think it was nearly 2 years later they brought it back because every artist that came to Marvel said, I want to do the X-Men because of those 10 issues. And the fans wrote in thousands and thousands of letters saying, that's what we want to see. So they reinstated the X-Men based on what I did, and it moved forward. I didn't have to do any more after that. Those 10 issues did it. The same thing is true with, I guess, Batman. The same thing is true with Green Arrow. They had a Green Arrow character who was, I don't know how to put this. He was an imitation of Batman. He had Speedy, he had an arrow car. They had seats that would eject them up to the 2nd or 3rd floor of a building, and they'd hit the wall and turn into peanut butter, something like that. They were basically imitations of Batman. So when I was asked to do Green Arrow in brave and bold with Batman, I said, I don't see how I can do that. It's a stupid character. It's always been a stupid character. And my editor said, well, we got to do it, or I got to skip an issue. I said, you know what? What if I change the character? Since he's an imitation of Batman, why don't I make him an imitation of Robin Hood, a modern day Robin Hood? Nobody will care. Okay, that's what you want to do. So I did. I changed him from an imitation of Batman to an imitation of Robin Hood. And everybody loved him. And they love him today. And guess what? He's got a TV show. And guess what? We call it the Neal Adams Show. Because when they get tired of, whatever characters have an arrow, they go and borrow them from Batman, Ra's al Ghul, and all the rest of it.
think everybody's a Neal Adams fan at this point, to be honest with you.
Don't forget, over there.
Yes. There's many prints, there's commissions you can get as well.
My wife over there is waiting for you.
She's also very lovely. Marilyn is fantastic.
Yes, she is.
She's really great. Another character that I would like to touch on, I know you've probably told the story a number of times, but it's one of the more interesting ones in my opinion is...
Don't they get to ask questions?
We're going to get to that.
You're very...
5-10 minutes, we'll get to questions, sorry.
I haven't got my Shatner signature yet.
No, not yet? No. We'll see if we can get you in line. He's pretty busy. And that's just, this John Stewart.
John Stewart.
The story of how John Stewart came to be is, if you guys have never heard of it before.
Okay, John Stewart is the first black character that isn't a gangbanger, who gets a superpower and decides to become a good guy. He's got a college education and he's a professional man. He's an architect. So if you guys want to hear that story? Okay. So I go into Julie Schwartz. I say, Julie, I think we ought to have a second Green Lantern. Now at that time we didn't have a lot of Green Lanterns. It was just Hal Jordan. Now we have, so I said we ought to have a guy to take his place just in case something happens. So he says, we already have that. We have this character, Guy Gardner. And he pulled out one of his volumes. He had his comic books, bound in volumes. So we pulled it out and we opened to the page. And I said, Julie, thank you. I don't read the comic book, so I don't know what you're talking about. So I said, so we have Guy Gardner. So what was Guy Gardner? I looked at him. He was this blonde, white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant gym teacher. I said, okay, so this is what I think we should do. We should hit him with a bus. Why? Why do you want to hit him with a bus? Well, if we just break his arm, he'll be gone for a month and a half or so, maybe 2 months. But if we hit him with a bus, he'll have internal injuries and all kinds of terrible things. He won't come back for years. Oh, by the way, we did in the book. We hit him with a bus. Same. In the back. Anyway. So why do you want to do that? Why do you want to get rid of it? I said, well, let me tell you a story. This character with purple skin comes from outer space. He's going to die, and he's got to find a new Green Lantern. His name is Alan Sir. Somebody's got gas. So he's going to find a new Green Lantern to replace him. He's going to find the bravest, most wonderful guy. Could be William Shatner. I'm just saying. Anyway, so he's going to find the bravest, most wonderful guy on Earth. So the ring flies around the Earth. It passes by Batman, passes by Superman, every hero in the DC and Marvel universe, and finds a test pilot. I got this. Yes, test pilots have balls of steel. The bravest men in my, would any of you become a test pilot? No. So he finds a test pilot. Hal Jordan becomes Green Lantern. Now, we're going to go around and we're going to find a replacement. And the ring goes out again and flies all over the world, passes by Batman and Superman and all these characters from the DC and Marvel universe, and they find a gym teacher. Okay, gym teachers are good. I like gym teachers. But really, white, Anglo-Saxon, blonde gym teacher in the Midwest. Julie said, I don't understand what's wrong with that. I said, well, Julie, you ever watch the Olympics? I said, I watch the Olympics. I said, how often do you see three white guys? I'm just saying. I see Asian guys, I see black guys, I see white guys. I rarely see three white guys. Maybe in, I don't know, archery. Archery. Shot put, maybe swimming. I mean, just saying. You usually see a lot of Asian and black guys. He says, you want a black Green Lantern, don't you? I said, Julie, am I that shallow that you can see through me so easily? He said, what about an Asian Green Lantern? I said, Julie, you haven't been so nice to the Asians. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, you have this guy that you've had in the Green Lantern book for 10 years, and he's Asian, and you call him Pie Face. Really? I didn't mean that as an insult. Julie, I could bring a bunch of Asians in here. You tell them to call a character Pie Face, I think they'd be pretty pissed off at you. Oh, okay. Okay. Want a black Green Lantern? I said, no, I don't want a black Green Lantern. I want a college-educated, professional man that people can be proud of. That kind of black Green Lantern. So he says, okay, you got it. You're gonna do it, but you have to draw it. I said, I think I have to draw it, not because I have to draw it, but because as far as I know, I'm the only guy in comics that knows how to draw black people. Even the black artists don't know how to draw black people. They've been trained to draw white people and put brown on them. So yeah, I'll draw it. So Denny O'Neil did a script, a very good script, and I read it. But I read the first page. The guy's tough, independent, good character. His name is Lincoln Washington. So I go to Denny, I say, Denny, Lincoln Washington. He says, not me, Julie. He decided Lincoln Washington. Okay, I go to Julie's room, I close the door and I lock it. I have a habit of doing that. Julie, Lincoln Washington. She said, I know a lot of guys with names like that. I said, Julie, that's a slave name. I mean, you know, it's a terrible thing. You don't want to do, people will be, I'm not going to do this comic book. You can't just, you know, it'll be insane. People are going to storm the building. This is not a good thing to do. He said, you pick a name. Julie, any name, put names in a bottle and pick one out. Just any, it doesn't matter. It's just a name, just a name. He said, you pick a name. I said, okay, fine. Jon Stewart. How would I know he'd become a late night comedian? So we got Jon Stewart. Okay. Story has two endings. One ending is they made a movie, they didn't include Jon Stewart, and they lost $150 million. $150 million. I think Jon Stewart should have been in the movie. Just saying. Another ending. When I colored Jon Stewart, I colored him brown. Not light brown, but brown. Up to that point in comics, and you can look it up, like a character named Gage in the Howling Commandos was colored gray. Gray. Look it up. Gray. So I colored him darker brown. So Julie Schwartz and Sal Harrison, head of production, come to track me down. We got the color guides, Neal, on this Jon Stewart character, and we noticed that you colored him kind of dark brown. Yes. Well, you know, usually when we do black people, we color them light brown. Yes, I know that. Well, you just color them kind of dark brown. Maybe maybe you want to change the code on that and make it a lighter brown. No, I don't think we want to do that. Well, you know, it doesn't take that much to change it, you know. Are you sure you don't want to do that? No, I don't want to do that. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to sound a little weird now, but then it was strange. And you have to understand, it was a victim of its time. Sal Harrison said to me, are you sure black people won't be offended? I said, I think they've been offended for about 50 years. No more. And if you get a letter, you just give it to me. I'll be glad to answer. And are we going to see Jon Stewart in the next Green Lantern movie? I think so.
I think so.
I think so.
That is a fantastic, yes, round of applause for that story. The story is amazing. We're going to open it up to you guys. You guys have been really great so far. So there's a microphone right there. If anyone wants to hop up here, ask Neal a question.
I can hear you.
Or scream. Anybody? No? Come on.
Okay. Listen, you can busy yourself getting stuff at my table. That'll be fine. That young man right over there, he got 2 drawings.
I'm so
good for you.
Too late.
Oh, is he going? Yes. Hop in there.
I've been a fan of yours for a long time. One of the other great stories, I don't know if everyone knows about, is the Green Arrow, Green Lantern story you did, where Speedy is addicted to heroin, which is one of the worst in time. You expand on how you came about this story.
Did you catch that?
Barely. But
What was the genesis of the Speedy addicted to heroin storyline? Was that it? Yeah.
For those of you who were following the Green Lantern, Green Arrow series when Denny and I were doing it, all of that writing was done by Denny and Neal. There were two exceptions: John Stewart, and I didn't write it. Denny wrote it. I named the character and I created the character and I brought it to the attention of the editor. But I saw we were kind of winding down with these stories, and Denny was kind of running. The last story that he was doing was an overpopulation story. Not a good story. It's overpopulation. You could fit the population of the world into the state of Texas. So I didn't think, there was a lot of craziness going on at the time about overpopulation. And it'll probably happen again, but that was bad. So I thought, this is going to end soon, so we have to do some things. So I went home and I did a cover. That cover you probably remember. It's the Speedy cover where he's got fixins on the table, and the Green Arrow comes in and says, oh my God, Speedy is a junkie.
I think you can buy a print of that at a table over there. Can't you?
I think you can buy it. I think you can buy the book. And so I gave it to my editor, Julie Schwartz, which by the way, I love, even though he's Julie Schwartz. Anyway, just saying. So anyway, I handed it to him, and of course he dropped it like it was made out of fire. And I said, we'll never print this cover. And I said, we ought to. We should print the cover. The cover was done, finished, letter, everything. I said, we'll never print this. Yeah, Adams, you're just starting trouble. That's right, Julie, starting trouble. You should print this cover. He said, 1, I will never print this cover. 2, I will never pay you for this cover. Just remember that. I'll remember that. So anyway, the cover sat on his desk for 3 months. Okay? Anybody that looked at it dropped it as soon as they picked it. Can't do that. Over at Marvel, I had a habit of visiting the guys at Marvel, Johnny Romita and the other guys. And Johnny Romita one day said, Neal, come here, look at this. And he showed me a Spider-Man issue where, what's his name, Osborn, took some pills, popped some pills, and walked out a window or something, walked up a roof. And now let me just say this about popping pills, quote, popping pills. You don't pop pills and walk off a roof. You take some pills and you go in the corner and sit quietly and hope that nobody talks to you because you're seeing things. Anyway, so Stan Lee wasn't what you call your drug addiction expert, but he did it. And I said, well, what happened? Did the code reject it? He said, yeah, the code rejected it. What are you going to do? He said, Stan went to his uncle, who was the publisher, and said, I'd like to print the comic book without the code Siegel. Really? That is so cool. And what are you going to do? You're going to do it. Okay. I went and the comic book was on the way to the press. So I went back the next week and I talked to Johnny. I got Johnny. So I said, what happened with Spider-Man? He said, nothing. Nothing. Nobody even noticed the seal was off. They had no one. Nobody sent a letter. Nobody objected. No. Nobody. There wasn't a letter. Nobody cares. I go over to DC Comics and people are running around like chickens with their heads cut off, screaming at one another, what's going on? Stan Lee beat us to it again. My cover had been sitting there for 3 months and Stan beat DC to the punch with his stupid popping pills and walking off a roof. They went crazy. Within 3 days, they called a meeting of the Comics Code Authority. And within 4 days, they changed the whole comics code, and they took all the teeth out of it, and slowly after that, it dwindled away. And after the meeting was done, Julie Schwartz came to me and said, Denny's going to write the story. I said, aces. And of course, he paid me for it.
I want to, just approximately, how many times have you had an I told you so moment?
I'd say almost every day.
Every day.
The waitress this morning at the hotel.
Oh, yeah.
Maria sat on the waffle machine. It doesn't fully cook the waffle. Oh, well, you just put it in, you just turn the rheostat. No, I don't think you understand. It's not fully cooking the waffle. Well, okay, you just put it in, you turn it over, and it cooks the waffle. Okay, I'm telling you, it doesn't cook the waffle. My wife had a waffle, and it's soft and mushy, and it pulls apart like gum. Oh, well, she just has to put the stuff in there and turn the thing on. Okay. Let's turn the number from 2 to 3. Well, then it'll cook more. You see, that's the idea. Every day. You ever walk into a public bathroom, and the seat wiggles around? Right? Seat wiggles around. There's 2 bolts in the back. All you got to do is tighten them. Reach back and tighten the bolts, and it'll be steady.
The next time you're in a public washroom, just reach around the toilets and just start tightening bolts.
I do that in comic book stores. Anytime I'm a guest in a comic book store, at some point or another, I have to go to the bathroom. Almost universally, the seat wiggles around. So I go and I tighten the bolts with my hand. Then I go out and I say, I tighten the bolts to your toilet. What? Your seat was wiggling around. I tightened the bolts. Neal Adams tightened the bolts to our toilet. Oh my God! And some of them even put signs up. Neal tightened the bolts.
Did you sign that? That'd be the best. You sign that sign and you tighten the bolts.
I should have.
Yeah. Another question.
Hey, is this on?
Yes, really loud.
Hi.
Who's on the mics? Can't hear her. Go ahead.
All right. My question is related to the creative process. And I'm always so interested to see how something comes from an idea into what we see as the consumer. So how does it work? Like, do you receive a script and then you have to storyboard something? And how many different iterations do you go through before we actually get to the end product? What does that creative process look like?
It's a process of flipping a coin. You just flip the coin all day. It's flipping the coin. I have to do it this way or that way. And it's pretty simple. And I'm not joking. I know I sound like I'm joking, but you have to get through what you're doing very, very rapidly, because you're supposed to be a professional. You're supposed to have ideas while you read the story of what should happen. And the last thing you have to decide is how big the panel is relative to the other panels. But you already have a philosophy if you've got a brain. And that philosophy is there ought to be one important panel on the page, and everything else should be slightly subservient to it. And so, since you're reading panel 1, you have to decide, is that the one? So you might read the page through, and then go back and say, not panel 1, panel 3, and then you start doing your layout. If you don't get through it quickly, you just spend an awful lot of time in indecision. Indecision is the bane of an artist's existence. You cannot be in indecision, even if you make a mistake. There are some artists who have actually been ruined by the fact that they start a page, they continue the page, and then they rip it up and throw it away because they knew they made a bad decision at the beginning. You just can't do that. You can't support a family, pay the mortgage, or anything like that. You have to really know what you're doing. So it's a more simple process, but it's because of experience. It's sort of like talking to a plumber, and he comes in, you say, I can't figure out how all this works, and he goes, right there. I gotta fix that, and then I gotta do that, and then he's done. It's because you're a professional, because you've had experience, you get to learn those things. And you sort of had it better. Is that good?
That's great. How do you learn to let that go? Because I feel like the creative vision is very romantic, but you have to be cut through.
I can tell you that. It comes down to an old philosophy, and for any of you who are interested, it's a very, very simple philosophy. It takes 2 people to create a great piece of art. one person to do it, and a second person to shoot him when it's done. Sorry. Finished. I really, swear to God.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they never stop. That's why you have so many dead artists.
Do you go back and look at your work and see kind of like things that you wish you could have changed? And
I have a cover on my table. It's Superman breaking chains. You know,
Oh, yeah.
It says Kryptonite Nevermore. It's one of the worst drawings I've ever done in my life. One leg is longer than the other. And the reason it's longer is they wanted to fit Kryptonite Nevermore between his legs, and I told them, they'll never fit, it's too big words. And they said, it's gotta fit. Okay, leg goes longer. I tried to make it look like it was doing something in perspective, but I know it failed, and I know it's a piece of, you know, but it's become so iconic that I just tell it as a funny story. I try not to get too serious that it's just a crappy drawing, but it is kind of a crappy drawing.
so if you want to own a crappy Neal Adams drawing,
Yeah, there you go.
head on over to the table.
It's legendary now for its crappiness.
Anyone else? We got time for a couple. There's one.
Hello?
Yes.
It's actually, your story reminds me of that woman in Italy or somewhere. She took the Jesus fresco and she slaughtered it to try and clean it up, and it looks ridiculous. That story.
Which one?
The Italian woman who tried to clean up the Jesus painting in a church,
Oh,
and it
really?
made it look insanely pathetic. And it became like, people now go there to see it. So it's a bad
Because it looks
drawing.
so bad.
Yeah, so it's like, so bad drawings can become great art too. That's all I'm saying.
So I've got to. So there's a hope that I can become a legendary artist then with my crappy, ill-proportioned drawings. I think. Like I was saying, yes, another one.
Yeah, I do have one. I hate to ask such a trite question, but do you have any advice for anyone who's looking to break into the comic
Yeah.
industry, either artist or writer?
I have an overall suggestion. Writers, everybody is a writer, and you shouldn't call yourself a writer until you're published. I had a room at the New York Comic Book Con, and I had an audience bigger than this. And I said to the audience, how many people in this room are artists, or feel they're artists, would like to become artists in comic books? And maybe 3 or 4 raised their hand. And then I said, how many people in the room want to be writers? Then half the room raised their hand. It takes so little to be a crappy writer. Because nobody can tell if it's crappy or not. As long as you speak the language pretty well, you can write. There's a famous story, and I find it famous only because I tell it, nobody else tells it. But Conan, the character Conan was written by, who wrote Conan? Who wrote Conan? Anybody? Robert E. Howard, right. So Robert E. Howard wrote Conan stories. And then these 2 writers later on, after Howard is dead and they're republishing the stories, L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter, 2 writers, decided they would finish Robert E. Howard's unfinished stories of Conan. They are so crappy. They are so horrible. They so misunderstand the writing of Robert E. Howard that you want to get a group of people that know something about writing, go to their homes and burn them down. That's how bad they are. They're just the worst possible. You couldn't pick worse writers to do Robert E. Howard type stuff. And everybody thinks Robert E. Howard is easy to do. It's not easy to do. It's very hard. You have to be willing to believe in ripping somebody's guts out. I don't personally believe it, but that's how stupid they are. So everybody's a writer. So I really can't advise writers, too bad, you're on your own. It's like minnows in a pond. You either make it or you don't. You're a catfish or you're not. Artists, a little bit different. If you want to be an artist, all the opinions of all your friends, okay, are stupid. They say that, and this is one of the things they say almost universally, a real artist doesn't trace photographs. A real artist doesn't trace photographs. All the best artists of the last 100 years trace photographs exclusively for their work. If you're an artist here, it's the first time you've heard it, look it up. All the best artists of the last 100 years. Why do I say 100 years? Because before that, we didn't have cameras. We had a camera lucida. And Rembrandt and Vermeer used the camera lucida. They didn't have film, but they had the camera. The camera was invented before film. And so they could project pictures onto their things. They had enough light. They could project it on their canvas. And they did. That's the best art. The best artists of the last 100 years, we can list them very easily. You can't because you don't know. So we'll list them. Drew Struzan. Do we know who Drew Struzan is? Anybody, raise your hand on Drew Struzan. Raiders of the Lost Ark poster, movie poster. Goonies. 100 other posters. Best movie poster artist in America ever, okay? Norman Rockwell. Yes, okay. Bob Peake, Austin Briggs, Bernie Fuchs, Al Parker, Alphonse Mucha. The best artists of the last 100 years. All trace photographs. And if you buy books on these guys and stop looking at the pretty pictures and just read the first 6 pages, it has what you call type, and you have to read it as words. You have to read the words. You will read, it will tell you exactly how they work, and exactly how they took pictures for their work, and exactly how they traced those photographs off. And if artists think they can't learn by doing this, it's because they're listening to stupid people who don't know what they're talking about. Because this is a fact, and opinion is just opinion. Fact, opinion. I'm telling you facts. I'm not telling you even my opinion, because I may have other opinions, but right here, this is facts. Do our teachers teach this? No, they don't. If you want to be a good artist, you have to learn to use the tools of the trade. A sketchbook in your back pocket, books on perspective and every other aspect of art, life drawing classes, and photographs and light boxes to trace pictures so you learn. And then all the best artists of the last 100 years can be your teachers, and you don't have to bother me at my table.
But go bother him at his table.
Yeah,
Because he's here, so you can. I think we get time
believe
for...
me, if you have any questions beyond what's happening here, come to my table and talk. We don't form a line. I don't believe in lines. And I have enough table around me to entertain you for a half hour before you even pick what you're going to get and come and ask me a question. I don't like lines, and I would rather talk to people and exchange stories. So please enjoy yourself at my table.
There you go. And I think we got time for one more, and then we will let Neal get back to the table. So, last question. It better be good, Aaron. I swear it better be good.
I wanted to know your opinion on the last 5 years in current comics. I mean, currently we've got things like DC Rebirth and the Marvel Legacy, where they're trying to...
I don't have any opinions. Didn't I just say it before? I don't have opinions. I list facts. Okay, I don't have opinions. I like to read comic books for entertainment. I don't like to read comic books to argue with people about it. I don't like to go to movies to argue with people about it unless they really suck, like the first 2 Hulk movies. Or a couple of the latest Superman movies. But anyway, no, if something is really bad, I would nod my head like everybody else, and I'll say all those things, and I'll make them funny. But Ma Kent working in a diner on the night shift, throwing out the garbage. She gets kidnapped. What is that? So, no, I don't have opinions about that, honestly. I don't like to have opinions. That's what you guys are for. Our job is to entertain you. Our job is to give you things to talk about. Our job is to get you to argue with each other and make the little gray cells spin around in your head. That's what our job is.
Will there be any work by you with any of the new DC Rebirth stuff?
What's that?
Are you going to be working on any of the Rebirth? I know you've done some covers.
They give me covers to do, and they let me do my own projects, like I did Batman Odyssey, which is, if you haven't read it, you're crazy. Then The Coming of Superman, and now Deadman. They kind of let me do stuff, but they let me do covers. So at my booth you'll see there's probably Rebirth covers. There are, yeah.
There's a really good
They do that because they like my sells extra copies of comic books, which is sort of a ripoff. You know, when you think about it.
Yeah. I've got one more, Nolan, on that. Do you feel that there is a limit on how many times a franchise can be
Ruined?
rebooted, ruined?
I think that the comic book characters that we have should stay the way they are. For the most part, they can be modernized a little bit, or if they're really bad, like Green Arrow was, they can be fixed.
Yeah.
But once you get it fixed, once you have Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman, you shouldn't mess with them.
Yeah.
And if you think you're so damn smart, why don't you make up your own character? I don't understand why it feels right to go and take a franchise that's already done, is already successful, already done by other people who may be dead now, and mess with it and turn it into something else just because you think you're smarter or more creative. Because you're not. You know the way to prove you're smarter and more creative? Create your own character, sell it to DC or don't sell it to anybody, and then do it and make it successful. Stop messing with other people's characters. I wouldn't do it, and I think it's wrong. And look, it's not, that may sound like an opinion, but I think it's the way people should act to each other normally. If I was Bob Kane, I wouldn't want my stuff messed with. I really wouldn't. And I think that's probably right. There's a guy, I'll tell you a story. I have know a guy named Bobby London who did a comic book called Air Pirates. Air Pirates is a takeoff of a Walt Disney comic. And this Walt Disney comic book was called Air Pirates, and it was about Mickey Mouse and Goofy and Donald Duck and these other characters. Really fun comic book if you're a kid, okay? And Bobby London and a bunch of other guys who did satires of cartoons. Bobby London does Dirty Duck. They did a satire, very sexual and very obscene. So Disney, the Disney company, Disney's dead now, said, you can't do that, so cease and desist before we sue you. So they didn't cease and desist. They didn't stop. They decided to keep on going. And then the company said, okay, cease and desist again. Did it twice. And then they decided, okay, we're going to sue you. Okay. Now, Bobby London and his friends didn't have that kind of money to be sued, but they were stubborn. So Bobby London's working at my studio, he's working on Dirty Duck, whatever it is. And he comes to me looking for my approval, because I'm, the maven. So he says, Neal, this is wrong, what they're doing is wrong. I said, hold on, Bobby, let's put this in another context, okay? Let's pretend you're Bobby London, you and your buddies, and you live on this block. And a relatively unsuccessful other guy named Walter Disney, has got one comic book, and he calls it Air Pirates. And that's all he's got. If you make a monster out of it, a giant out of it, then you can't view him right. So we'll just say he's Walter, and he's doing Air Pirates. And now you do an obscene, salacious version of his comic book. And he comes to your house and he says, hey, please, this is all I have to live on. My comic book, and you're making it unsellable because people think it's obscene. And they're complaining to the comic book store. Wouldn't you stop if he's your friend? Well, just because it's a corporation doesn't mean it's not another person. It's another person. It's Walter Disney. And you're ruining his product. And that's not a right thing to do. Now, he wanted my help and he wanted my approval. He didn't get it. He didn't get it because he was wrong. Not because it's my opinion. It's just that that's not the way you treat other people. You don't take their stuff and turn it to garbage. Which, by the way, is half what goes on the internet. Yeah, so, not to be a judge, but really, you create your own character.
Yeah.
You got a great idea? Do it. Don't ruin somebody else's character.
I guess we got 2 minutes. Is it a quick one?
It can't be. Well, hey Neal, I was wondering, I was a big fan growing up of Bucky O'Hare.
Yes,
with your continuity line, so I just...
Coming out as new toys, by the way.
I saw that.
They're great.
I saw that, they look fantastic. I had all the toys too, so I was wondering if there's a quick story, even how that came about, because I know I met Michael Golden a couple weeks ago, but was that pitched to you, or were you involved in Bucky O'Hare?
Well, I wasn't in that. I am the proprietor of Bucky O'Hare, just like DC is the proprietor of Batman.
Okay.
We share equally between Larry Hama, Michael Golden, and myself. I am the proprietor. I'm the mean guy that says, no, that's a lousy deal. Yes, it's a good deal. Incidentally, I do a bunch of the artwork, but I really follow Michael Golden's work. But they're the only two people that we let do the work. It's either Michael or myself. Every once in a while, there's some people that can do it, but we have a group. We're trying to build it into a computer animated movie like everybody is, and we'd be fools not to. And we have people out in Hollywood peddling it, and when it happens, everybody will go, oh, wow, Bucky O'Hare. But right now, we've got a coloring book, we've got graphic novels, and we've got the new toys that are coming out, which are tremendously animated and articulated, and they have snap-on faces and stuff. It's really a great toy. So that's a way that we're kind of maneuvering Bucky O'Hare to get back into the limelight. So we hope it gets done. We'll see.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, because a lot of my own childhood is very important to me, so thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect, and I think that is it